There is a number sitting in your bank account right now that is quietly reshaping your entire brain. And no, it is not $1 million. It is not even close to that. It is $50,000. And what it does to your psychology is borderline terrifying. Most people will never reach this number, and the ones who do are never the same again. But before we get to the transformation, let me show you where it all starts. Picture a guy named Frank. He is 26 years old and living paycheck to paycheck every single month. Every Friday, his direct deposit hits, and by Wednesday, the account is nearly empty again. His brain is stuck in what neuroscientists call survival mode, a state of constant low-level panic. The amygdala, the fear center of the brain, is firing constantly like a smoke alarm that never shuts off. Every purchase triggers a microdose of anxiety, and every bill feels like a small emergency. Frank cannot think about the future because his brain is too busy panicking about right now. This is not laziness. This is neuroscience. His prefrontal cortex is literally being hijacked by stress. So Frank starts saving. Not a lot, maybe $50 a week from his paycheck. The first few months feel absolutely pointless, like filling an ocean with a garden hose. But something genuinely strange begins to happen once his savings crosses the $2,000 mark. His brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine every time he checks his balance and sees it has grown. This is the same chemical that fires when you get a like on social media or bite into chocolate. Except this dopamine hit is fundamentally different because it is tied to something real and lasting. By the time he hits $5,000, Frank notices he is actually sleeping better at night. His cortisol levels, the stress hormone, begin to quietly drop for the first time in years. He stops waking up at 3 in the morning with that sinking feeling in his chest. But here is where things get truly interesting, and most people have no idea this happens. Around $10,000, his brain starts to completely rewire its entire relationship with time itself. Suddenly, he is no longer just surviving week to week, he can actually see 3 months ahead. Psychologists call this expanded temporal horizon, and it changes everything about how you make decisions. Instead of grabbing fast food, because it is easy, Frank starts meal prepping because he can think ahead. Instead of buying cheap shoes that fall apart, he buys quality ones that last 2 years. His decisions become investments instead of reactions, and his brain is doing this completely automatically. At $20,000, something genuinely dramatic shifts in the way Frank behaves around other people. He stops saying yes to every invitation that costs money just to avoid looking broke. For the first time, he can say no without shame, and his brain registers this as power. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the region that processes self-worth, starts lighting up completely differently now. Frank does not just have money, he has options, and options change the chemistry of your brain. He walks into work on Monday morning, and his posture, his energy, everything about him is different. His boss notices, his coworkers notice, and he starts getting treated differently without saying a single word. But let me tell you what nobody warns you about. The part that catches everyone completely off guard. At $30,000, Frank's brain quietly enters what psychologists describe as a dangerous psychological zone. He has tasted financial security, and now his brain is absolutely terrified of losing it. Loss aversion kicks in hard. The pain of losing money becomes twice as powerful as the joy of gaining it. He starts obsessing over his bank balance, checking it 4 or 5 times a day. He turns down dinner with friends, not because he cannot afford it, but because spending feels physically painful. His brain has flipped from scarcity mode to hoarding mode, and both of them are prisons. This is the exact psychological trap that derails most savers right before they are about to break through. Frank has to fight his own brain to keep living a real life while he builds wealth. And then one random Tuesday morning it finally happens. The account crosses $50,000. Frank stares at the number on his phone screen, and something inside him goes completely quiet. The constant background noise of financial anxiety that has been running since childhood just stops. Neuroscientists have actually measured this phenomenon. It is a real and measurable reduction in baseline cortisol production. Your brain literally recategorizes you from someone who is vulnerable to someone who is fundamentally safe. And that feeling of deep safety is the single most powerful drug your brain is capable of producing. Now, here is what most finance channels and money gurus will never actually tell you about this moment. $50,000 is not life-changing money. You cannot retire on it or buy a house outright. But your brain does not care about the math. It only cares about the signal. 50,000 tells your nervous system that you are not one emergency away from total disaster anymore. That signal rewires your default emotional state from chronic fear to a baseline of calm. And from that place of calm, everything else in your life begins to upgrade almost automatically. Frank's creativity at work explodes because his prefrontal cortex is finally free from survival processing. He starts having ideas he never would have had when his brain was drowning in money stress. His relationships improve because he is no longer secretly resentful or ashamed around people with more money. He stops comparing himself to others because his internal scorecard has fundamentally and permanently changed. But here is the twist that researchers found that genuinely shocked even the scientists studying this. The happiness boost from hitting 50,000 does not actually come from the money itself. It comes from the identity shift. Frank no longer sees himself as someone who is bad with money. He sees himself as someone who can set a massive goal and actually follow through and achieve it. That new self-image bleeds into every other area of his life like ink dropped in clear water. He starts exercising because a person who can save 50,000 can obviously handle a gym routine. He reads more. He procrastinates less. He takes on challenges he would have completely avoided before. Psychologists call this identity-based momentum, and it is the real wealth that $50,000 buys you. Your brain creates a brand new narrative where you are the kind of person who actually wins. And once your brain truly believes that story, it filters every single decision through that winning lens. Now, here is what happens to Frank after 50,000 that absolutely nobody talks about. The second $50,000 comes almost twice as fast as the first 50,000 did, not just because of compound interest, but because his habits and psychology are completely different now. He does not have to force himself to save anymore, because saving is simply who he is. His brain has automated the behavior that used to require enormous willpower every single day. The neural pathways for delayed gratification have been strengthened like a muscle trained for years. And this is the real secret behind every wealthy person you have ever admired or envied. They did not just accumulate money, they accumulated a psychology that makes wealth almost inevitable. $50,000 is not a finish line. It is the moment your brain finally switches teams. It stops working against you and starts working for you, and that changes absolutely everything.